now. Okay. You want to do the intro again?
You want to?
No, you do it.
Okay, sure. Welcome back to Been There, Done That, a show where we talk to college and high school students about their experiences. We are your hosts, Prajit Srinivas.
And Pranav Srinivas.
And today, once again on the panel, we have Shriya Bhat,
a graduating senior from Plano East High School, the valedictorian, and she will be a rising freshman at Harvard this fall.
And Yaamini Jois, a graduating senior from Capella High School, attending UC Berkeley in her freshman year and having a planned transfer to Cornell University. Thank you guys so much for being with us here today.
Of course, yeah.
So the first question, just on the general idea of the college application, what should go into an application? Is it unique for every school, or is there one certain thing that everyone should consider as a part of it?
Yeah, so for pretty much all college applications, for the most part, will require you to write a Common App essay. And you can pretty much find the prompts for that online already if you just search up Common App 2023, essay prompts, like they pretty much are the same throughout every year. So if you wanted to, you could start that right now, and pretty much every college will require you to do that. There's a few exceptions, like I believe MIT has their own portal and they don't require you to write the Common App essay, but they have their own set of essays that they do have you write. But for the most part, pretty much every school will have you do that. And I believe that's pretty much the same for most Texas schools as well. Like UT Austin, for example, will require you to write that. And then Texas A&M, I think it's optional. I don't really remember, but it's always good to have that ready.
Yeah, and then in terms of the Common App itself, so the Common App personal statement essay is like, I guess when someone says, college essay, that's kind of what they're referring to. That's what it translates to, the Common App personal statement. That's 650 words.
Oh, it looks like Yaamini froze for a second there, so let's move on to a different question for a minute, and then if we get it back, then we'll see what an answer is to that. So I know you're going to an out of state school, Shriya. What is the difference between applying or going to UT or going to an out of state school?
Yeah, there's a few differences in the application process, I think, for lots of Texas schools like Texas A&M, for example, and I think SMU too. They have their own um, Texas portal. Apply Texas, I believe is what it's called, but I think some of the schools allows you to apply on the Common App still. UT Austin, though, does let you apply on the Common App, and you'll use that Common App portal for pretty much all of the colleges you apply to. For example, I applied to a total of, I think, 5 or 6 schools, and for the most part, I use the Common App for that. It's really easy. You just write one essay that you use for pretty much every college you apply to, and then each school will have their own set of supplemental essays that they have you write about. And for some schools, it's very easy. Like there's not many supplemental essays. For example, for Harvard, when I was applying, they had me write a long essay, which was about 650 words, and then they had a couple of short prompts. But for Stanford, for example, they have you write a lot of their own supplemental essays, and Stanford doesn't really care about the Common App as much as they do their own essay prompt. So it really depends on the school. Some will put more emphasis on that larger common application essay, and then some will have their own essays that they really emphasize a lot more. And I never actually applied to Berkeley, but I think Yaamini can speak more about that process. And I know the UC system is different than most colleges that you apply to.
Yeah, so I missed the last part of it, but the Common App is a little bit, I would say, it's just kind of straightforward. You have your personal statement and then the supplementals that are different for each school. Like for example, for Cornell, my Common App was 650 words, and then I actually had a supplemental that was also 650 words, which that isn't really that common. Most of the supplementals are a lot shorter, which kind of makes it harder, I would say. Like I think some of them I had were like 150 characters to maybe 50 words, but They can be usually I would say 100 to 250 words. And then for the Berkeley one, there is no Common App essay. There's only 4 short answer questions, and you pick those questions. So you can pick which ones to answer out of a pool of 8 questions. And what I did actually was, and this applies to any school that you apply to, is you reuse, reuse, reuse. You don't want to write like 50 essays from scratch because it's a waste of time, and I promise you're not going to be able to get through that. It's like a mental, like it demands a lot. So you just learn to reuse them. So I picked the 4 questions that really fit, or like I aligned with what I wrote for my Common App essay. And then I just chunked them apart and then kind of cleaned up the edges a little. And then I remember that the 2 questions that I picked really perfectly were what my Common App essay were about. So it worked out perfectly. But I think the other 2 questions I picked did require me to kind of, speak a little bit more original work. I kind of had to do that on the spot. But that, it's really not like, I think once you get the hang of it, of how to write about yourself, how to, test your own skills, it's really just kind of more formulaic. But you don't ever want to think of it like that. I don't think you want to be like, okay, so here's what I have to mention. It's not really like, you don't want to like be bragging about yourself, but you want to bring up that these are the things I've done. This is what I've done with the 4 years I was given in high school. So that's what I did for the Berkeley app. It was the 4 questions. And then I remember I just mostly, touched on the same things I did for my other supplementals. I took my Cornell supplemental, which is the first one I worked on. And so I took it and I just repurposed it for all the other ones, because I knew that one I'd put a lot of time into. I knew it would work. So honestly, it's just a game of, how to reuse.
Yeah, and going back to what you mentioned on your Berkeley and Cornell application, I know you have a plan transfer to Cornell in your sophomore year. How exactly does that work, and how should people that want to try doing that go about applying for it?
Yeah, so the way that well, the thing is that you can't apply for the process. So Cornell is a little bit different in that so I applied early decision to Cornell, which is like the restrictive, you can only apply to one, it's early. So I was deferred in the first like round, and then so my application was taken and then moved into the regular decision round. And so when the regular decision round happens, Cornell is a little bit more unique in that they give you um 4 decisions instead of 3. Usually the 3 is rejected, accepted, or waitlisted. And Cornell has a fourth, which is the guaranteed transfer option. So I received the guaranteed transfer option, which basically is just that you spend your first year at a different university. So I'm spending it at UC Berkeley because that's the other school I got into that I really liked. So what I'll be doing is I will spend my first year, and then as long as I meet the GPA requirement and all, I have a transfer option to Cornell. So I will be able to spend the last 3 years of college at Cornell and graduate from Cornell. So I mean, it's a little bit rare. I've heard it's not really the most um, popular option that students will receive, but there's not really a way to receive it either. You just kind of do. And so I took the option because I really liked how it worked out for me personally, because I really wanted to go to UC Berkeley. I didn't really think I would get in. And so since it's in California, I wanted to go to California and New York. Kind of worked out for me. So I can spend, my time at college in 2 schools that are really good, that I really will have a lot of fun at, and, get to, spend a lot of opportunities at. So it kind of worked out a little bit nicely for me, but there's not really a way to get the option. It's kind of a little rare actually.
Yeah, and from both of y'all's experiences with applying to different colleges, doing all the different supplementals, what are some do's and don'ts for the college application process?
I think this is something that probably a lot of people have mentioned at some point, but a do is definitely to start early, and a don't is to start late. If you're a rising senior right now, it would have been ideal for you to ask your teachers for rec letters towards the end of your junior year, that school year. So that's a good place to start asking for rec letters. And if you haven't done it already, that's okay. You can just send some emails, and if that doesn't work, just straight at the beginning of the school year begin to ask. But that's the first step, is to ask your teachers for rec letters, make sure they're okay doing that and that they're willing. And then, you know, during the summers is a great time to start working on your essays. I know it seems pretty far away, but the deadline looms, like creeps up on you, and you have no idea, and then suddenly it's time to apply to college, and you know you don't want to be overly stressed out. So I think a good timeline, you know, for in just in general, is to finish your personal statement or your common application essay by the summer and start working on your supplementals towards the end of the summer. Now I'm saying that, but I actually didn't really follow that timeline. I was working on the essays till last minute, and I think Yamini's laughing. I think all seniors like pretty much don't really finish their essays at the time that we say we're going to. But that's definitely a good place to be, is if you at least have a solid draft of your common app essay and some drafts of your supplementals to, if a school you're applying early to, then that's a great timeline. Actually, Yaamini mentioned like ED or early decision, and I think that's an important note to bring up. I think if you're, you know, maybe if you're younger, you're not sure, but there's different ways to apply to college at different times. Some schools will let you apply to their college earlier than most other applicants would be applying, and there's different ways to apply early. So for certain schools, like for example Cornell, and I believe lots of other Ivy League schools like Columbia and UPenn, they have something called the early decision. So you apply in like beginning of November, you submit your application, and then by mid-December, usually they'll tell you if they've admitted you or not. And if you were admitted, you have to go to that school. You were locked in, like that is the school you will attend. You have to withdraw all of your other college applications. Rare exception is maybe if they're not providing you enough financial aid, you can argue out of that. But if you've applied early decision to that school and you've been admitted, that is the school you'll go to, no questions. And lots of people choose that option because they're so sure they want to go to that school. And it's really great because you have a higher chance of getting in if you apply early. Or at least typically for early decision, the admission rates tend to be a bit higher because those people are so sure they want to go to that school, and the college knows that if the student is admitted, they have to attend. So they're more likely to admit you. Now, there's another type of early called restrictive early action, or REA. There's some schools like Harvard, for example, was REA, meaning you can only apply early to one school and it will be that school, but you are not locked in. So if you get into the school, you don't have to attend. You can still apply to other schools if you'd like to, but it's just nice knowing that, you know, you've applied early, you know you got in, and you have an option that's ready for you, just kind of guaranteed. And then the last type of early is called early action. This is, I think MIT famously has early action. You can apply early to the school, but you can also apply early to other private colleges. So a lot of people tend to like that option because you can apply early to a bunch of schools and shoot your shot, see where you get in. But something I also wanted to mention is if you apply restrictive early action to a school, that you can still apply early to public schools. So if I applied REA to Harvard in November, I can still apply early to UT Austin if I wanted to. And that really isn't an issue. But yeah.
And then one more thing to bring up with early decision is, so I mentioned I early decision to Cornell, and so I would really advise that you don't early decision to a school unless you are 100% sure you want to attend. So you really want to think about everything that comes with, attending a school, whether that be tuition or, hey, if I get into a better school after this, would I choose that school instead? So if you're, early decisioning to like maybe one school, but then you're like actually hoping you'll get into a different school and you're just not sure if you will, but then you end up getting in, you don't want to come across that kind of situation because then you're stuck. You have to attend the school. And it's really not something you should try to get out of because you've kind of put yourself into that contract. So early decision is you kind of have to think about it. I wasn't even sure I wanted to early decision to Cornell, but then I realized, I kind of wanted to shoot that shot because I was sure I would attend if I got in. And the thing is that even though the acceptance rates are, presented as being higher, it's actually not really that much easier to get into because the people who are applying are people who are one very qualified candidate, so you're going up against extremely like cream of the crop students, and they're also sure they'll get in. So these kids are like kids who know that they're built for this school and they know their shot at getting in. And so um those students are the people you're going up against. And also if they're, submitting it early November, you can kind of bet that their essays are already polished, ready to go. And they're confident on their application. It's not students who are, doing it last minute because, those students are doing it RD if they have to. So you kind of want to think about all those things. And, unless you're sure you really want to take that chance, I would really advise you don't do early decision. I had to think about it. I wasn't sure I would because I didn't want to go against those students. I wasn't sure if I would be competitive enough. And I didn't want to be rejected in December, but I kind of took a bet. I was like, you know what? Either I'll be deferred or accepted, and I want to take that shot because if you're deferred, I think you're supposed to be more of a priority candidate for a regular decision, but I only know that for Cornell. I don't really know how the other schools are. So unless you're really, really sure you want to take that decision, I would advise you just stick to early action or regular decision or even REA, which some like I know Harvard and Yale have that, but Cornell does not. Cornell only has early decision. So you want to think about, you factor all these things in when you make that decision on when to hit submit. And another thing about hitting submit is that it's really hard to do for your first school because Cornell was the first school I had to submit, and it was also my dream school. So hitting submit took so long for me. Like I think I had it ready to go for 2 weeks before the deadline, and I couldn't submit until the day before it was due because I was so scared. I was ready to call them up and be like, did I do it right? Like, please don't cancel my application. So you want to think about all these things when you're actually working on it. That's why Shriya, mentioned how important it is to start early. Please don't underestimate how important it is to start early. I did not, and I really paid for it. I was really regretting it because it takes time to write it. You get writer's block a lot, especially if you're writing about yourself. It's really hard to do to sit down. And then when you write it, I promise you're never going to read it and be like, this is the best thing I've ever written. You're always going to want to send it to edits, and edits take time, and it'll take time for you to polish it. It'll take time for you to feel confident. And then sometimes you want to give it 3 days without even thinking about it, because then you'll come back and be like, wait, that's the word I was looking for. Um, with all these things factored in, it really does take time. So don't really think of it as just you read an essay and hit submit, because there's so many things that you don't really think about until you're faced with them that it just, extends how long it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're totally right. I think the people applying early tend to just be a little more qualified than, RD applicants because they have their essays ready, they're ready to go. And yeah, that's something I definitely did not think about. But yeah, for sure, that's definitely a factor. I think something else I wanted to mention is that totally like if you want to ED a school, just like be so sure you want to go there because if you get in, you're bound to it. But even if you're applying early to a school, like restrictive early action, for example, I would just apply to the school that you really want to go to because it's a psychological thing. If you apply early to the school and you get in, that's awesome. Like you're great. Like your ego will be boosted. Like you'll just feel good. Like you'll know, like, okay, like, worst case scenario, nothing else works out. Like I'm going to the school, like I will be fine. And that, momentum helps you get through writing all the other essays if you choose to still apply. But, if you don't get in, like it can be kind of disappointing, especially if you applied early to a school that you thought was supposedly easier to get into, and that's why you applied early there, and then you don't get in, then maybe that can affect your confidence a little bit. So just apply early to the school you want to go to. Like, don't try and play a game of like, like I think I'm more likely to get in here, so I'm gonna apply early here, and then yeah, just I feel like just ask yourself like what school do I really want to go to, like what school would I really be happy attending, and apply early there. Don't think about all the logistics and I know things like that.
Yes, that is so important. Don't play that game of like, oh, I have a shot, like, oh, like I don't think I can get into this school, but I have a good shot at this school, so I'll apply early here. Because then if you're in, you don't care about it. You're like, well, whatever. And you don't want that to happen to you during this like process because it's so important to care about where you're going. I can say I applied to like two schools that I genuinely did not. I feel like I applied because I was like, it's on my list, but then I was like, I don't really care if I get in or not because can I even see myself going here? Don't play that game. You should really apply to schools that you want to go to. And even if you think like, oh, I don't really have a shot of getting in here, like just apply. Like you never ever know. Like you really don't know. And the only thing that you'll lose is, some time and maybe even the application money. But you never want to take that chance of like, or like not take that chance because you genuinely never know. Like I think that sometimes it's just, you think you can't get in, but you have no idea. Like you really don't, you won't know until you get the results. And if you don't get in, that's okay. Like that's really not, it's not gonna define who you are. But if you do get in, I mean, see, like you put that application in, you take that shot. You just don't want to regret not applying because that's not the good feeling.
Yeah, and did you guys do that work all by yourself, or did you do it with some counselors, some other help? How do you get in touch with those people?
So for me, I just asked a lot of my teachers to read through my essays. I had a lot of friends that I'd made in a summer program that we kind of helped each other read our essays, and I think that was far more helpful than honestly some of my teachers reading my essays because I think they're kind of more in tune of like what kids write and just like what AOs want to see, although we have no idea what AOs want to see. Just because you get into a school, you have no idea how you got in. So yeah, like that's kind of the resources I used. My mom, she wouldn't like necessarily edit my essays, but she would tell me if there were any red flags or something that just stood out as like, don't include that, don't say that sort of a thing. But other than that, I think that's kind of how I went through the process.
Yeah, that was also how I did it. I was kind of pretty dead set on not having a college counselor or, someone else who I didn't know read my essays because I think going into the process, the only one thing that I knew about what admissions officer wanted is that they wanted to read a 17 or 16-year-old's work. Like they didn't want to read a perfectly polished, thing that some PhD professor or like that's not what they want to see, I don't think. They expect that they're reading a high school senior's writing. They know they're going to see something that make it pretty like abundantly clear that a kid wrote it and not someone really professional, which is why I didn't want someone who was, a college counselor because I trusted my friends, my mentors. What I did was I had two of my friends who were in college. They read it over, they gave me edits, and I told them be really, really harsh, like if you see any red flags at all, tell me. Like I don't want to leave any mistakes in here. And I had different people edit for different things. So the freshmen, they read over, overall structure, does it sound good? How is the flow of it? Does it, sound like I wrote it? Um, and then I had a mentor from outside of school really crack down on grammar, punctuation, straight up just English, because I didn't expect myself to get all that right. I mean, I just typed it. Like the way that I did, I just sat down, I just typed kind of like word vomit, like whatever I could think of. And then I kind of polished it down, but then I left a bunch of things that I knew that other people would catch a lot faster than me. And so they caught those things and they told me, use this word instead of this, describe this more, put some more, elements here. And so that's what I had them edit for. And then I had my best friend and my parents read over it just to see if it sounded like me. Like, does it sound like I wrote this? Because I like to think that they can really tell if, you sat down and you put the work and, they can see you writing it. I think that's, to be honest, like what, is something I think that's important, but again, I genuinely don't know what it is about my application that worked. I would hope that it's my essays because I feel like I definitely had a good process with them, but it's kind of a guessing game for me right now.
Yeah, to speak on that note, like I remember after I submitted my application, oh, Yamini's so right about like it's so hard to press submit, especially to your early school. You're just so worried. But I remember after I submitted the essays, like I read over them and I'm like, oh, these are so bad. How did I submit this? Like, there's no way this went through so many layers of like editing. Like, how is this what I submitted? So like, pro tip, don't read your essays after you submit them. You're gonna think they sound cringe, like no matter what, no matter how good they are, like you are not gonna like them. So don't read them after, and just have like a little faith. Like I didn't like my essays, like even the days leading up until we got our decision, like I was thinking like there's no way I'm getting in, like these essays were just so bad. But it works out. Like I think we were both very excited to receive our acceptances and finally all that hard work paid off, and we realized like it's all behind us and you'll get to that point eventually and feel satisfied with whatever work you've put in and how much you worked throughout high school. So, just take it day by day. I think like having set deadlines for yourself, like I'll finish this essay this day, or I'll have a first draft of this by, Friday or something like that, at least it helped me a lot throughout the process because it's so daunting. So many colleges to apply to and so many essays to write. So if you just have set little deadlines, I think that really helps.
Yeah, that's how I went about it. I had a calendar and then I, chunked it up by weeks. Like by Friday, I'll have this done. I'll send it off to edits and then I'll get it back. And then, I'll work on this by Tuesday. And so that's the only thing that saved me during this process, just having that organization. Otherwise, I feel like I would have been too lost. I wouldn't have known how to take it because it's such a big task that you just don't know where to start, I think. But being able to chunk it up like that is really helpful. And I promise, especially, even like putting aside the intense task that is applying to colleges, getting your results and, finally being able to conclude the process is such a fulfilling moment that you're just like, I'm done. Like, you have so much to look forward to in the next 4 years. And anytime that you're stressed, think about that moment because I promise it really motivates you to put the work in now and get it done. Because anytime that I was scared, I would think about, I would picture an acceptance letter. I'd be like, you know what, like, I'm scared right now, I'm stressed right now, but think about that acceptance letter from this school. Think about being, finally being able to say, yeah, I've applied to college, I'm done, like, I'm going to this school, I'm proud of myself. That really, really motivated me because you've done the 4 years of work. Now it's just one more thing. And I think, once you get it done, it's such a nice, fulfilling end that it makes it worth it, I feel like.
Yeah, and to kind of conclude this episode, what advice would you give someone that's a sophomore going into junior year or a freshman going into sophomore year, someone even earlier potentially, to like keep in mind while they're not yet writing the college applications?
I would say don't do things just for the college app process. Like just don't do it just to put it on your college app because I promise you, anything that I did as a freshman just for that purpose, I didn't even put on my Common App. There's only 10 things you can put on your Common App. Like there's 10 slots for extracurriculars you did in 4 years. And think about like, would I truly attest to my work here? Like would you do an activity? Maybe it's like a club. And on the Common App, you have a short description to really talk about what you did in that club. And you really need to pack those 150 characters with a lot of work. Like you want to say, this isn't like a rubbish activity. Like I really put my heart and soul into this. So if it's not something that you're sure you can really talk about, don't do it. I mean, don't waste your time doing things that you think that will impress some like college person sitting like 1,000 miles away. Like don't do those things because I promise the most important thing, and this sounds cliche, like I'm sure I got this advice when I was a freshman and I was like, that can't be true. But like I promise, now that I've gone through the process, I can tell you it is. You really should only do things that you care about, that you're passionate about, because those are the things that make you stand out. Because I promise not everyone's as passionate about those things as you are. So if you can talk about them and really have that like sparkle in your eye when you're describing all the things you got to do, that is what really makes you stand out and not like the million clubs that you did and the 1,000 volunteer hours also.
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak a little more on that, like make sure you know how to talk about those activities and how they specifically affected you. Like an admissions officer doesn't care if you've done DECA for 4 years unless you've done something significant from it, or it's changed you, or you've learned something from it, or it's influenced what you want to study, or, it has to have had some effect on you. Otherwise, you've just been doing it. And, that's kind of the end of that story. So I think having some, or thinking in advance about just how you will talk about those things and how they've changed you or taught you a lesson, I think is really important because that's ultimately what you're going to write your essays about. And I think that's what should be shining throughout all your essays is not just I've done this, 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 and this, but how has that shaped me and, potentially even influenced what I see myself doing in the future. I think, you know, I can't speak for an AO, but that's what I imagine an AO would like to see when they're reading your essays.
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit more specific to Berkeley because I just know that Berkeley itself is a little bit more of a holistic school. They don't, I think, for anyone applying to the UCs, it's test. They don't look at your test score, so they really put a huge emphasis on your grades and your extracurriculars. And the one thing that I think they're looking for, especially Berkeley, is your potential at that school, and that goes true for so many schools that they're not looking for, oh, this person has already done so much and so much, but like, can you take that and do more at this school? I think the only way you can prove that is by doing those things and by being able to say how the things you've done in high school have shaped you. Because that is, I mean, you're still a kid. Like, they're looking for how you have learned and like grown in the past 4 years, and not like how you're already perfect, so you'll be even more perfect. Like, that's just not what. And I know that a lot of times, you kind of fall into that trap. Like, I can't show any flaws. Like, I can't show that I have, that I'm still growing. Like, no, like, they want to know, here's how I was in my freshman year, and then I did this, and this is how I grew from that. I think like just being able to show that is what is kind of a standout.
And I know for me, this is I'm mentioning freshman year, and all these insights have helped me so much. And for our audience, I'm sure they greatly appreciate everything you guys have said. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time to talk about your experiences. And this is the end of an episode of Been Than That. Stay tuned for these coming weeks. We're gonna have more and more episodes. And this is us signing off. Bye.
Bye.